Right, hello everyone, and welcome to How to Get a Graduate Job in Property. If everyone could just please put hello or give me a thumbs up in the chat to let me know you can hear and see us all okay. Cool, perfect. So today's panel webinar consists of Chloe from Group GTI, who will be hosting the webinar, and she'll be gathering all kinds of useful tips and information from Hannah from CBRE and Hebe from Savills. So thank you again for tuning in, and I'll now hand over to Chloe.
Thanks, Connor. Welcome both of you. Thanks so much for joining us today. What we're currently running is multiple webinars about different subject areas and different skills. So thanks so much for joining us on Property One. We've got lots of people joining us today. So hopefully we can share some really interesting insights, give you an opportunity to tell us about your organisations and to answer lots of the questions that are asked. Can I start with kind of an introduction of who you are, what you do, and the organisations you work for? So, Hebe, do you want to go first?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Hebe, and I look after the graduate recruitment and our internship programs at Savills. So Savills is a global real estate provider, so about 39,000 employees across 70 countries. And I look after sort of the Savills UK side of graduate recruitment. So our graduate schemes and placement schemes are really important to the business, really passionate about kind of young talent, and about 40% of our board actually start as graduates. So yeah, very keen on the graduate schemes. We also host insight programs and also our summer scheme and sandwich placement years as well. So looking forward to hearing some questions from you all.
Thank you. Hi, Hannah.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I work at CBRE. CBRE is the world's largest commercial real estate services investment firm. We're based globally with over 100,000 employees across over 500 offices across the world. But I'm predominantly based in the UK and head up all of the early careers, kind of next generation recruitment at CBRE. We've got 15 offices across the UK, and so we hire into kind of all over them basically, and have 13 different graduate pathways into CBRE.
Amazing. And how, kind of, for those that are kind of coming into property as an interest in the sector, can you explain the differences between your organisations, kind of, and if you can expand on that to try and cover any aspects of property that either of you don't represent, so people can see kind of a whole vision of property as a sector?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a CBRE perspective, we're kind of broken into two arms. So we have the advisory side, which is the side that I sit on, and then we have a side which is referred to as GWS, which is more kind of the on-site side. In the advisory side, we don't necessarily, I think kind of one of the biggest misconceptions is we are an estate agency or a construction firm, which we're neither really. We do a lot more of the kind of advisory to our clients on kind of every different side of the lifestyle, property life cycle. We predominantly work with larger scale projects, mainly focusing on the commercial side, but we do also touch on residential. But rather than doing kind of one-off residential, we'll do normally kind of really big, large blocks. So some of the kind of huge residential outlets that you see in London, for example, we're probably quite heavily involved in that. But when I say kind of property life cycle, it might be from kind of acquiring property, selling, developing, planning, property management, investment, but then also we've obviously got all of the kind of other areas and business services streams as well. So we've got the marketing, the finance, the HR, kind of everything that also makes a business kind of operate, I suppose.
That makes sense. And then Hebe, how does Savills compare?
I guess in terms of the graduates, it's quite similar, the roles that we're looking for. But I think, probably the service lines are like the biggest misconception, and people would normally see Savills as an estate agent for these graduate type roles. We've got lots of different areas of the business, but we even hire like sustainability focused graduates, engineers, energy consultants. So it is really diverse in terms of the number of roles that you can go into. So mainly focused on advisory positions as well.
And do you find with kind of these kind of supporting positions, do graduates need to have an interest in property to excel in those roles, or can you tell us why kind of doing HR or finance or marketing role within the property sector is really interesting as opposed to a different sector?
Yeah, I guess we both work in those functions. So we'd sit under HR
True.
within the property industry. I think the industry as a whole is really, really sociable. So definitely the people that you work with on a day-to-day are obviously all of the kind of fee earners in the business are the ones who you'll be relating to and working with in terms of if that's finding them graduates or if you're in terms of finance. So yeah, I think as an industry, it's really friendly and very sociable. So that's probably the biggest sort of positive for me, the thing I like most about the industry. Don't know about you, Hannah.
Yeah, I think I didn't have a huge scope of knowledge of property before I came into CBRE. My journey into kind of here was a bit of a weird one, but I think you kind of learn lots of different stuff, but also it's quite cool to be involved in a company that is making an impact in actual direct things around you. I mean, you kind of walk down the street and you'll see one of our logos on a building that you probably knew that we probably didn't know that we had anything to do with, but actually we're maybe kind of managing that property, or we're kind of responsible for finding new companies to let that property to, and those types of things. So I think it's really interesting to be a part from that perspective, but also as Hebe mentioned, we've both got sustainability teams at our companies, and we're fully aware that obviously real estate plays quite a large part in kind of carbon emissions to the UK, 30% in fact. So it's really cool to be involved in a company that's very forward thinking and making a lot of positive impact in kind of reducing that and kind of making real estate more, it's a commodity at the end of the day. It's not going anywhere, but actually how can we make that more environmentally friendly and more sustainable for the future?
Yeah, it's really interesting kind of from where I sit. So for those watching, kind of we look after at Target Jobs kind of hundreds of graduate recruiters, all from different sectors, and I have conversations with Hannah and Hebe kind of regularly, and it's really interesting. I've been doing this. It was announced it was my 12-year anniversary here recently, so I've been doing this a long time, and it's really interesting to see how roles change and develop, and sectors and the people they're looking after, and we see much more of these sustainability type roles coming through from sectors you would expect, like kind of property, to ones that you wouldn't like, kind of a finance based as well. 'Cause it's really important to everyone, so it is really interesting to be able to sit and watch all of that change and grow. Do your organizations have sustainability targets associated with them, and do people does everyone contribute to that target kind of through every role?
Yeah, so I don't know if we're probably similar in both ways, but yeah, so we have internal like ESG related teams who work on the business's goals, but then we also, so the roles I was mentioning earlier that we'd hire graduates into, they would usually then be like consultancy based roles to advise other businesses on how to be more sustainable. So yeah, we've got it internally, but then also our teams work for their clients obviously externally.
Yeah, same with us. We've got actually when I started I started in CBRE just over 2 years ago, and the environmental, social and governance consultancy team was about 20 people, and kind of very much in their kind of early stages and kind of doing kind of bits and bobs on the side. We're now kind of getting close to 100 people strong in that team. So it's grown rapidly, which the recruitment team love all the role requests from there. But yeah, it's been a huge growth area for us. And it's, again, we have our own internal team. So we have a target to become net zero as a company by 2040. And 7 out of our 15 offices are currently kind of working towards net zero or will be achieving net zero soon. So we're kind of getting there. But then, yeah, there's every different service line will also then reach out and kind of incorporate the ESG team into their dealings, because I think it's top of the priority list for our clients as well at the moment. And I think that's the thing that the industry has had to react to the clients' needs and their kind of demands on that side.
And my final question kind of on this is, what do you expect from those you're interviewing in terms of being able to talk about the subject of sustainability?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think kind of being aware of the full industry, like, is obviously important, and then being aware of the changes that then affect the industry. So it's kind of like being aware of current affairs, isn't it? And how that would then affect sort of future movements, and also the specific area that you're interested in, how it's related. So not only sustainability, but kind of, yeah, anything that's currently happening that's going to affect that area. Definitely important to be aware of.
Yeah, just off the bat, I think it's one of those things as well that we want people coming in who are going to be passionate about kind of being involved in that as well. And I think that's really important. So kind of when you're going through that interview stage, I'm sure Savills, like myself, like CBRE, it's one of our kind of high priorities. It's one of our values. So I think it's kind of making sure that you're aware of that and kind of translating that into an interview and kind of showing that passion for it.
So putting sustainability one side, I think it's really interesting. And we have got a sustainability webinar in July. But thinking about what you were saying, Hannah, about kind of values and carrying on the interviewing conversation, kind of, what are your values as organisations, and what do you expect from students in the interview process on that?
So our values, we call them our RISE values. So it's respect, integrity, service, and excellence. And it's kind of at the forefront of everything that we do. I think a lot of them, we hope, are kind of just kind of inherent values of people anyway. I think a big kind of motto across CBRE is the client first, your team second, and then yourself as kind of a third priority. There are our top 3 priorities. We want to make sure that the client is obviously getting the best service. You want to make sure you're kind of collaborating, respecting your teammates, but also we want to make sure that you're kind of also looking after yourself and looking after your well-being within the workplace. And I think I actually very recently had an interview with an apprentice coming through, and probably gave one of the best answers I've ever heard of kind of why they wanted to work at CBRE. And they were just able to speak so passionately about kind of the work that we've done and the values that we've got and how that align with their values. And I think one of the easiest things to do in an interview, and I think it takes a lot of practice, because I probably still do it myself now, is it's very easy just to list off the things that you know about a company. So it's very easy to go, oh, I've heard you've got RISE values, which are respect, integrity, service, and excellence. End of, like, that's great. Well done. You've done your research. But it's actually, what does that mean to you? What impact are you going to have on those values? How, like, it always reminds me of kind of being back in school when you kind of used to think about, what was it, like point explanation or like evidence or something. I was very bad at school. It's that kind of essence of, yeah, you've made a point. It's then kind of growing on it, like showing that evidence and then kind of explaining what that means to you and what you're going to bring to the company. And I think that's the difference between a good interview answer and an excellent interview answer. And it sounds really cliche, but especially with how competitive a lot of these graduate schemes are these days, not just from our perspective, but across the board, it is making sure that you're kind of answering the question to your best of your ability.
Hebe, how kind of important are the values? When you're interviewing, how much is skill and how much is value and company fit?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I think skills, especially in our industry, you can kind of be taught all of the information that you need to know, but it's more about kind of what you're interested in, and then also, are you willing to learn? That's like the main thing I think we look for in our graduates. Are they actually genuinely really interested, and do they want to work hard and sort of get on in the organization as well? And I think values, yeah, they definitely fall into that. So ours are teamwork and sort of passion, innovation, leadership, trusted partner, and excellence. So again, a lot based around the clients, a lot based around the teams, and working together. But ultimately, it is a very people-focused sort of industry. So working as a team is really important and something that you will be doing day to day. So, making sure that the company is also right for you is so important. Like, we want you to enjoy where you work. So I think, yeah, that's really key. And that's also going on about like research into the business. It's really important to actually understand what a business is like before you're going to decide whether you want to work there or not. So showing that you've done that research and that you actually understand, the values of the business and how the business operates is key for an interview. And definitely, I think, as Hannah was saying, like, you can tell when someone really understands and has gone kind of the extra mile.
It must be lovely for you both, kind of being the positions you are, kind of interviewing people, remembering who they are, remembering their great answers, and then being able to like just see them then in the office. And you kind of, just as you will have people in your organizations that will purchase land and survey it, and you can look up at buildings, you can also then look at the people, right?
Yeah, it is really nice.
It must be lovely watching their career progress.
You always have those ones that you remember as well. And I think whenever I go to kind of the inductions and I remember people's names, it's normally because of good reasons or bad reasons. I think that's another thing though, is when you're coming along to those assessment centres, really kind of standing out, making yourself known, kind of, and doing those little things like sending an email afterwards, following up, and kind of those little touches that just kind of make you kind of memorable in someone's brain, because that will kind of help to form that whole kind of personal profile.
Yeah.
And do you, in your experience, and I appreciate this might be a tough question, do you find that you can interview people and then how they play out in their career is exactly is what you saw in that interview process? You kind of like, you can't fake it, right? Kind of, you're experts in what you do. You ask the questions that get the kind of the true answers, and that's important because, as you said, Hebe, it's, you want them to really enjoy their role, and that's when they're motivated, and no one wants to have a bad time at work. We're at work more than we are at home, so everyone wants to be in a really good, happy, motivated place. And so kind of that's what your interviews are for, right? To make sure they're a right fit for your organizations. So do they follow that path that you expect?
I think, yeah, I don't actually undertake the interviews. So our team organise everything, but it's outsourced to specific teams who undertake those interviews. But we attend all of the assessment centres and things like that. So definitely get to know people throughout the process. And I've been in my role for about 5 years now. So yeah, you definitely see people going through and like on promotion lists and things like that. And it's really nice to see progression through the years. But I think you definitely can tell as well on people who really stand out on those days, and who are going to do really well in the business.
And I think off the back of that as well, like, you know the ones who are going to be on the promotion list first as well, and when they come out, because they're the ones that are putting themselves, like, it's one thing getting the job, right? Like that's it's kind of like driving, like you're doing your driving test. They always say like that. I always come out with these really cringy like scenarios, but just go with it. But like you pass your test, but then you don't actually learn to drive until you're like driving on your own. And it's the same thing. Like you've got into the company, you've got the job, that's great. But then it's like, what do you do with it afterwards? And kind of how do you maximize your time and your input, and therefore then the output that you get from that company as well. And the ones that are putting themselves forward for things and kind of just getting stuck in and kind of doing lots of different side projects alongside the day job, they're the ones that are going to be kind of really noticed by the senior leadership and are going to be kind of going through those promotions, and kind of getting that one step further as well. And I think it makes a huge difference. It's that unfortunately the hard work doesn't just end when you get the job. You need to carry forward.
So what does career development look like both at CBRE and Savills?
Yeah, so I think pretty much all of our grad programs are 2 years. So after the 2-year point, they would qualify, and then they would no longer be part of the graduate scheme. So then would go into just being a normal member of the business. And at that stage, we have what's called a Next Steps program. So we have a training team who look after our graduates, and then also a learning and development team who look after the rest of the business. But specifically for those who've just come off the graduate scheme and got into sort of the formal role, we have a Next Steps program to look at their next 5 years and kind of plan out progression, and support. And really, like, your line managers support you so much and should be the people kind of championing you through to the next stage in your career, definitely. So I think you really can make of it what you want to. So that if you put the hard work in, you will progress, definitely, and some progress so quickly.
Yeah, when you qualify, again with us, it's a 2-year program. For anyone coming in from a non-cognate background, so someone who hasn't necessarily studied real estate, they might they'll sit their APC, which is the kind of qualification, to become a chartered surveyor a little bit after, because they'll be finishing their masters. But then once they qualify, everyone goes on to so they'll be a surveyor, qualified surveyor, and then the next steps from there is kind of senior surveyor and upwards. But we've got kind of very kind of open, transparent promotion criteria and the kind of the competencies that you need to be meeting and hitting in order to get to the next stage. And that's, like Hebe says, it's that conversation with your line manager and saying, okay, this is where I want to get to, this is when I want to get to that, how do I kind of put the structure in place in order to get to that next stage. But it's kind of, we're very clear about it. Ultimately, we want people to kind of develop and succeed and continue to be challenging themselves and pushing themselves in their role. And so it's really important that you're kind of then aware of that criteria to meet it.
Just while we will come to questions later, but I've just seen one that's come into the chat that it is relevant, and that's from a Gladness, who is asking, how do I get onto a non-cognate graduate scheme? So can you kind of expand on that terminology, and the qualifications involved and why they're there and how it all differs?
Yeah, I think it is a property thing that we all say, don't we? Non-cognate, but most people don't know what that means. Sorry, the lights in here are going on and off. So non-cognate in terms of RICS or a surveying graduate scheme just means that you haven't studied an accredited degree. So the RICS is a governing body, the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, and then you take that qualification once you're in the business to become a chartered surveyor. But in order to even start the process, you have to have a degree that's accredited. So you can either undertake a master's whilst you're in the business, as Hannah was referring to earlier, or you can undertake the master's before or do an undergraduate that's accredited. So that's what a non-cognate background would be. So somebody who doesn't have a related degree, or if it was for planning, it would be RTPI accredited. And we have many different pathways, so depending on the route you're going down, that would be non-cognate if you weren't doing a related degree, I guess. So you might just need a bit more support in the business. And then also most of the grads who join, they undertake an apprenticeship master's, so a master's, but it's 1 day out per week, so 20% of the job is towards the study.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the same as us. But yeah, we've got, I think it's 13 different pathways, and some of them accept cognates and non-cognates. Some of them only accept cognates. So for example, our building surveying pathway, that currently we only accept cognate students, so you need to have studied a building surveying degree. But then for like our commercial pathway, which is our most popular one, we accept people from a non-cognate background or a cognate background. We had someone previously come from a marketing degree, so completely unrelated, nothing to do with property, but he just kind of got really into, kind of figured out what property was and was really into it. And this year, out of our graduate cohort, 55% of our cohort were non-cognate graduates, so it's not kind of an unheard of thing. 45% of our cohort were non-cognate graduates, so it's a very kind of, nearly half of our cohort are non-cognate, so you don't have to have studied a specific real estate degree or real estate related degree. I think that's kind of probably one of the biggest changes in the industry, is that we're starting to get a lot more non-cognate students coming through.
So just so I understand this, someone is at an undergraduate level, they are on a non-cognate degree, so let's say history, and they make an application, so they have to complete a master's while working with you, or them in a year before they start working with you? How does that work?
They can
They'll
do it
do it
either way.
once. Yeah. Sorry, yeah. They'll do it. They might have done a master's already, so they might be currently doing a real estate master's degree, and then apply us, and that's also covered by. Sorry, I think my internet just dropped us then.
It did.
They can do the masters alongside their graduate scheme, which is also covered and paid for by the company.
So would you encourage kind of anyone that wants to give it a go and feels that they align with your organisations and values to just come and ask the question, basically?
Absolutely. I think it's a hugely, like, there's so many kind of avenues, and I mean, we have a workplace team, which is, majority of them come from a psychology background, so they work in our advisory and transactions team, and they advise clients on how to kind of best position their offices for kind of psychological well-being of employees. So that's a really cool place to kind of work in. But and so I think there's so many different niches across the business that people don't know about. And so absolutely, I think no matter what your degree, I would say kind of, if CBRE or Savills is the kind of company that you could see yourself working at and you're interested in that kind of world, then 1000% don't kind of rule yourself out because you haven't done a property related degree, or you haven't got work experience in property or anything like that. Just apply.
Definitely. I would say more than half of our applicants are from a non-cognate background. So
and Zav's asked a question in the chat about, what if you have a master's that isn't a cognate master's? Do you then do another master's?
Yeah.
Why not collect them?
Exactly.
Just do the master, become a master of masters.
Yeah. Multiple masters, but you wouldn't then have to fund that master's. So yeah.
That makes sense. My a friend of mine from university actually studied biology, and then she decided to go and do a master's and then became a surveyor. I was like, where's this come from? But we all follow our own
realize
path.
what a fantastic industry it is to work in.
Exactly. And I would guess really secure, right? As you said, it's something that we're always going to need. And while I suppose that the technology around surveying changes and kind of the focus on sustainability, and I presume like things like brownfield sites kind of impacts, the necessity of them is always going to be there.
Yeah, I think you can tell by like recruitment numbers and things as well, can't you? How many people are joining businesses, etc. That you know, there's always new people coming into the industry, and it is an industry that is going to grow.
I've lost track of my questions. So in terms of work experience, what do you expect people to have work experience? Kind of this kind of ties into what we were just talking about, but what do you expect? And I've been around long enough to know that work experience can take many different forms. So what would you say kind of would make people stand out? And I would say also kind of, it's how they express and talk about it, right?
I think for us, we're especially realizing that not everyone has the network and the connections to kind of get themselves work experience. It's not the easiest thing to do in the world. So I'm always very passionate at the fact that you don't need to have work experience. That's not something that's required. Instead, what I would recommend is, so that you're not coming in completely blind, recognizing the power of LinkedIn and utilizing that. One of my biggest tips to anyone is finding out an area that you're interested in, connecting with those people on LinkedIn, asking what they do, what their day job entails, what kind of projects they get involved in. People love to talk about themselves and the work that they do. So utilizing that and taking an interest and starting to build that network. I mean, the property industry is a networking business ultimately. And so you need to get comfortable with networking and kind of reaching out to people on LinkedIn. And it could literally be anyone random another thing that I always recommend as well is, don't just go for one company. Speak to lots of different companies. Find out about what Savills do, what we do, what the other property companies do, and see which company aligns most to your values and your kind of way of working and everything like that, because it is a two-way situation. It's a relationship at the end of the day. You need to be happy at that place and they need to be happy with you. And so kind of just start connecting with people. Work experience, I think, is not the be all and end all. If you can secure it, fantastic, like that's brilliant. But if you can't, just having those conversations and then building those conversations that you've had into your application form or into your interview and saying, oh, I've had conversations with such and such and such and such and such and such, that's going to make you stand out from the people, because it shows that you're doing your own independent research rather than just your family friend was able to get you some work experience at somewhere.
Nice.
Yeah, I think
Phoebe,
I would
anything
agree.
to add?
Yeah, agree as well. And anything that can show kind of transferable skills. So if that's like a part-time role that you're doing, if it's people skills that you're looking for, anything like that, I think work experience as well that you've applied for does it really good. So schemes that obviously have fair processes to get the experience, kind of showing that you've gone through the process and obtained that would be really good. But also just, you can note on your CV that you read publications, property publications, or you keep up to date with the podcast or look at websites. We all produce loads of sort of insights and research as well. So yeah, I think showing interest outside of your course and also into the industry, is always positive.
Are there any specific publications, podcasts, webinar producers, that any professional bodies that you'd recommend people get involved in?
I think it's totally up to the individual. I think it's definitely worth researching a few and also looking at the companies as well, because lots of the individual companies produce loads and loads of research and have podcasts and things like that. So I think, it depends what you're interested in and which sector as well, as to what would be probably of most interest.
A question that's just come in is how is it worth saying? I'll read the question. While writing the CV, should I mention my experience working in a retail convenience store? I suppose the question is, do you find that a positive or a negative? So that's the question of whether you would put it on there, and if it's a positive, why? Or negative, why?
Definitely positive. I always think any experience is good experience anyway. And some of the challenges you might have had in that job, you might also have in a different job, although it wouldn't be exactly the same. You probably learn how to deal with certain situations, and you have to be professional, don't you? So yeah, I would say 100% that would be a positive thing. Definitely a good idea to put on the CV.
I would agree. But one thing I would say is that any kind of, and I realized this from quite an early age, well, not actually an early age, sorry, later on in my career, is that I kind of just listed everything that I did, and I was like, oh, I did this and I did that. And when I was 25, I still had like my I think my GCSEs on there, like individually.
Girl guides.
Which you probably don't need anymore. But I
Mm.
think anything that you're putting on there, and I think your CV, number one, top tip, don't make it any longer than 2 pages. If you can fit it onto 1 page, then that's ideal. But if you can, like, don't go over 2 pages, because people aren't going to look beyond that. And anything that you're putting on your CV, if it is not directly relevant to that role, so if you're putting on that you've got retail work, then great, but link it back to the role that you're working for. Make everything relevant to the role that you're applying for, because also that's going to show that you've tailored your CV to that position. It takes longer, I completely appreciate that. That's I see a lot of stuff on CVs and I think, what use is that to this position? And I think it's about really tweaking it, looking at the roles and responsibilities that are on the job descriptions, and tweaking your CV so that it's kind of in line with those roles and responsibilities. And if one of those roles and responsibilities is good communication, and you've had that from a retail experience, from retail kind of work, then great, but link that back in. During my retail work, I was able to communicate with customers on a professional level or whatever, and then that you're then ticking kind of one of the job, like the roles and responsibilities for the job.
And you've got to be able to talk about it, be prepared to talk about it, because it's likely that experience will come up again at interview stages, because that's what you're working off as the base as a recruiter. So it's, you don't want to end up kind of going, oh, I don't really want to talk about that, I got sacked, or I didn't enjoy it. Okay, good tips. Is there anything? Oh, we've kind of talked about that. Hang on, 2 secs. Oh, recruitment process. Kind of, can you give us an insight into what your recruitment process is like?
Yeah, we are currently reviewing the full process, so this might slightly change, but at the moment, so we do applications usually September time, mid-September to mid-November, and then screening after that. We do like a behavioural assessment as well, and then to kind of, it gauges candidates' potential for roles. And then following that, we do assessment centres. So they normally take place in December and January. And then following those, we do interviews. So it is a bit of a lengthy process. We are looking at slightly streamlining it next year, but we quite like a lot of touch points and seeing candidates quite a lot, because it means you get to know them very well. And then also they get to know the business and can see lots of people throughout the process. That's currently what we do.
Pretty similar for us. Our applications open beginning of September. Currently, application form and CV. From there, we do a job focused testing, which is kind of similar kind of behavioural profile testing, and then from there, if you're successful, then you'll be invited to our assessment centre. And from our assessment centre, you'd then be invited to an interview. And then from there, we may potentially have a follow-up interview, or it'd be then to offer.
And with the interviews with the hiring managers, the people that they would be working directly for?
Yes, in some cases, yes. In other cases, not all the time, because we don't necessarily know exactly who the line manager is at that stage, but it'll be someone from that area of the business.
And what about kind of life outside the day job? What does that look like? Hannah and you and I met kind of last week. You were telling me about drag bingo. What have you got going on?
Yeah, so we've got CBRE is kind of, inclusivity is probably at the heart of kind of everything that we do, and we're very big on kind kind of charity days and kind of lots of kind of getting you out and about and doing lots of different things. We have lots of different networks at CBRE, so it might be like the Proud Network, which organised our drag bingo. It was the first of its kind in our cafe downstairs, and we had 2 drag queens come in, and it was fantastic to see. But also we then have kind of different kind of charity events going on. We have lots of last month we had our row 50 event, so all of the different offices got rowing machines put in the offices, and we had to row 50 kilometers in groups of 5. I was a cheerleader. I did not partake. That was all for Macmillan, and that day alone we raised £36,000 for Macmillan. We've been partnered with Macmillan for over 2 years, for just this is coming up to our 2nd year, and in those 2 years we've raised just under £1 million for Macmillan. So there is loads of charity stuff going on, whether or not it's kind of some of the mighty hikes, and it doesn't necessarily have to be for Macmillan as well. You get 2 charity days a year to use on top of your annual leave, but then there's lots of kind of sports teams. There's obviously kind of the social side as well. We are a very social business, so it might be kind of going for a drink or kind of doing team events. I would say there's lots and lots of stuff going on outside of the day-to-day kind of 9 to 5 job.
And is that the same across all of your offices? Kind of often it can feel like that's very London focused, but great atmosphere across all 15?
Yeah, so with the row 50 specifically, so all of the offices that had teams that wanted to partake had the rowing machines put there, and then we were all kind of live streamed, connected, so everyone could see all the different offices doing it, and it all got very competitive, who could complete it first, obviously. But yeah, the different kind of hubs around the UK as well are always doing different things. So they might kind of do like a regional, like super regional kind of hike, or kind of meet up for a kind of super regional kind of quarterly meetup and things like that. So yeah, there's, no matter where you are, you always kind of feel very kind of engaged with the other employees.
Nice. Hebe?
Yeah, I think probably, I feel like I'm going to repeat. So yeah, similar type things. I mean, lots of networks across the business, and we have lots of graduate committees that then kind of feed into wider business committees as well. So yeah, I think we've got graduates in about 40 of our UK offices, so just in the bigger ones. But again, lots going on like across them. And then also we have 6 like really core diversity and inclusion groups. So they're across the full business, so the Savills UK business, and each of our kind of areas then feeds into recruitment, and yeah, all sort of different stages. So we've the age, disability, ethnicity, gender, LGBTQ+, and socioeconomic, and lots of our kind of graduates, but then also members of the business up to like our managing director sit on each of those boards. So yeah, lots to get involved with.
And do your graduates kind of have a community themselves? Do you encourage them to kind of have this kind of peer kind of, they've all come on at the same time together? Do they network in that way, or is it that once they're in their streams and departments, off they go?
Yeah, no, definitely. So we have about 350 graduates at the moment. So that would have been kind of 2 cohorts, because they generally stay on for 2 years. And then some, as Hannah was mentioning earlier, stay on for 2.5 if they're undertaking the masters as well. But yeah, so they all come in for like a main induction, everybody together. So all of the offices, so everybody meets each other. And then they also have pathway specific training days. So that's irrespective of location. So they all meet up quite a lot. And then, yeah, in terms of events and socials and things like that, they do all travel to different offices quite a lot as well. So it's definitely like a big cohort. And I think that's something that the graduates really like. It supports their training. And then also, just got friends in so many of the offices. So, yeah.
Nice. And is there much opportunity to exchange between offices in the UK and then work abroad?
Yeah. Sorry, cutting you off there.
So during the graduate scheme, we ideally would prefer for you to stay in the office that you've initially been kind of assigned to, because that's kind of how we've planned it. and so that you can kind of get the most out of your training throughout that first couple of years. But then absolutely after that, once you've qualified, we are kind of, internal mobility is something that's really important to us, and so we want to make sure that everyone feels that they can go and explore opportunities if they want to. Ultimately, I think it's really important that everyone feels like they're always being kind of challenged, always kind of enjoying their job. And so there's something that's not quite right in your current position, or if you feel like you could be doing something better in another team or another office or another country, then absolutely we would prefer you to kind of stay within the business than go over to Savills. No, I'm joking. But yeah, absolutely, we want to make sure that you're kind of getting the most out of it. So if you feel that you want to move to a different location, then yeah, we can support you in that.
Yeah.
Hebe, you want to throw anything back?
Yeah. No, what can I say? No, it is, yeah, again, possible to move as well. Generally, people tend not to do it because, again, their experience during their qualification round. But some of our graduates do go on global rotations. They'll spend 4 months going to a different office globally. But since COVID, that's sort of slowed down a bit. So it's something we're looking at getting back into at the moment. And then also since leaving the EU, visas differences and things, but yeah, the most recent ones went to Sydney for 4 months, so it is a possibility whilst on the scheme. But then also there's so much movement once they qualify, and lots of people move offices quite regularly. Yeah.
I'm really conscious of the questions. I managed to ask some as we have gone along, but let me just have a scan through. Do you have any project? Okay, so international students, kind of, I suppose the question is this. The question I've got is very specific to a specific course, but how do you view international students within your organisations? Both those that are currently studying and who have qualified.
Yeah, I think as long as, I mean, we're kind of open to international students or kind of UK students, doesn't matter. We ask that students have right to work on the commencement of their graduate scheme. But yeah, we're kind of very open. I would say that there is kind of we require that kind of working language, kind of English level. But other than that, absolutely, as long as you've kind of got that right to work in the UK from commencement of the graduate scheme, then yeah, absolutely apply.
Yeah, us too. I think with recent changes and the new graduate visa and things, yeah, we're able to kind of offer those positions. So yeah.
Thank you. Hopefully that answered your question, Olabusi. Job opportunities in the field of real estate as property valuer. I suppose my question is, what is a property valuer?
So that would sit within our valuations team, which falls under the commercial real estate pathway, and also the residential. It's those kind of more traditional main pathways. For kind of both of those, actually, you need to do a rotation within valuations in order to do your APC. So yeah, it would be that kind of commercial or residential pathway.
Christian, my question is how much. Okay, so I feel like we've answered this one already, but just to reiterate, so Christian is a finance student, recently completed his MSc in finance. So how would they get a job in property? I think I know the answer. They would need to apply and then take on a master's that would be a cognate degree if they were going into a relevant stream, and then be kind of taken on the qualifications from there. Did I do well?
Yeah.
There's also like the financial analyst pathway that they could look at as well, or capital allowances. We've got a pathway in capital allowances, which is a bit more kind of finance based. So yeah, I would recommend kind of looking at all of the different pathways, and I'm guessing, Chloe, they'll probably get a link to all of the different pathways afterwards. But yeah, I would recommend kind of looking at all of them, and because there are some of our pathways that are more finance focused than kind of or like it might be property finance related. So yeah, probably worth looking at those.
Yeah, and it's not in every case that you would have to do the masters. So depending on which pathway you're applying to. Yeah.
I asked. Thank you so much for those expanding on my. This is what I've learned. I was just trying to show off. I already asked Gladys's question about kind of getting into a non-cognate grad scheme. She has expanded and said that she's found it really hard. Kind of competition is high. Is that something that you would concur with?
Yeah,
I would say kind of across the board it's competitive, and I think it's I mean, applications are incredibly high, I think, and so it is just doing those things on kind of the application form like we mentioned, and kind of just trying to researching the company, seeing what their values are, making sure you're kind of aligning with those values. But yeah, it is competitive. I would completely agree. I don't know. Yeah, Hebe might be able to add to that.
Yeah, I think it is competitive. I don't know if it's the same with you, Hannah, but our kind of pathways do definitely vary in terms of competitiveness and also based on location as well. So that might be something to look into. Generally, graduates prefer the London roles, and we would get a higher volume of candidates for those roles. So it is worth also getting in touch with the businesses and asking them, where would be less competitive and things like that, because it's definitely worth asking. But
that's great advice. And as you said, kind of almost half your cohort are from non-cognate degrees, so it's you've definitely got an appetite for it. So it's thinking about all those other ways that you can show that you align with values and culture and the experience you've got, and translating the courses that they have been doing into how it can be useful, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And if you are applying for a non-cognate background, you're kind of showing that you've got a real interest in the industry anyway, aren't you? Because otherwise, why would you be applying for those jobs when it's not related to your degree? So yeah, I think showing that you're passionate.
Gladys is definitely passionate. She wants to know when applications are open and how to stand out. I feel like we've answered a lot of that already. So kind of you both said that open in September. It's quite a short window to be open, September to November. So you do have to kind of be really focused and on it with those applications. And then we've talked about kind of standing out, so being able to kind of align yourselves with the values of the organisation and be able to use your relevant experience and be able to explain that back. Would you add anything else to that?
I think for applications, just really reading what they're asking you to do as well. Like we've changed our applications this year, so we're not asking for a cover letter. Oh, there's the light again. So we're not asking for a cover letter, but lots of candidates still did it. So it's just kind of showing that you're really reading what you're actually being asked to do and making sure that you're answering the questions that you're being asked. Sticking to timelines and things. We post our timeline at 3 months in advance. We'll still get hundreds of people on the day saying, oh, just missed it, by an hour or by this or by that. They've been open for 2 months. So just we're unable to accept them late. Also, it's, to be fair. So yeah, just try and make sure that you make note of all of those small things that then actually will make a big difference in the end.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And that attention to detail piece, it's when you're filling out, that's your kind of one window. That's you've got kind of a very small window there to make an impact. And so if you've got spelling mistakes, if you've got, the amount of people who I've seen who have spelt CBRE incorrectly, it's an instant no, unfortunately. When we've got 3,000 applicants, it is competitive, and so it's kind of really being attention to detail focused, and because that's also something that we look for as kind of part of our skills kind of profile. And so if you can't kind of on that one application form that really matters, if you can't focus kind of on the attention there, then it is tricky. Sorry.
It shows you care as well, right? kind of, if you really care about something, you give it 100%, and if you give any hint that you're not, then there will be plenty of others that do. I appreciate that it's tough, but I also think it's quite a simple thing to be able to understand. And I think if anyone else was in that situation and was kind of doing that role, they would kind of go, actually, I think I would make that same decision.
Yeah, and being quite generic as well. I think try and give it as much focus as you possibly can. If you're applying to, CBRE, don't accidentally write Savills, or vice versa. We get that a lot. When
we get that a lot.
I get that a lot. Total Jobs is all over every CV.
Yeah. So we understand, obviously, that you're applying to different firms, and that's absolutely fine. But it's attention to detail, isn't it? And yeah, maybe you just leave the feeling that you're not really that interested in that role. So because you've got such a high volume of candidates, you just wouldn't even be considered for the next stage.
So moving through quickly, does age matter for a graduate scheme? No. Thank you for the quick answer. Is the grad scheme only open for master's students? No. Do you provide sponsorships? We have spoken about that. Are there any grad schemes still open for this year?
Nope.
Sometimes we will have ad hoc ones, so it will be posted on the website if there are new roles, but all of the sort of ones we already know about have been filled.
Back to the age, even if the candidate is 48.
No.
Yeah, we'll still consider them.
As a no issue.
Yeah.
We've also had lots of people who join as a second career as graduates.
I suppose you bring with it a whole new wealth of kind of different perspective, and that's what I've seen recruitment change so much in my time. It can be a benefit if you come from different experiences and backgrounds, and actually recruiters don't want copies of the same person over and over and over again.
Definitely.
I think the one thing with the more mature graduates that we get through, though, is just making sure that you're still kind of realistic about salary. The salary is kind of benchmarked across all of the graduates, and so it just might be more of kind of an entry level salary rather than kind of an experience level salary.
Nice. And can you apply from Ireland?
Yeah.
That is all my questions. Thanks for speeding up at the end. Just kind of to close it off, thanks ever so much for your question, for your answers, and your honesty and clarity. I think there's some kind of really hard things to get your head around if you're not part of the sector, around kind of qualifications and entry routes. Both organisations kind of really value kind of culture and differences in people. It sounds like a really fascinating sector to be part of, that will only kind of continue to evolve and change. I imagine kind of you have kind of had some interesting changes during COVID, and Hebe, you mentioned Brexit and how it's impacted things. But kind of we still see these beautiful buildings going up all the time, and it must be really kind of thrilling to know that in some way that you've been part of that journey. So I think it must be fascinating. I'm going to invite Connor back on screen. I'm looking up because he's sitting opposite me, to kind of close off and talk about the webinars we've got coming up next. But Hebe, Hannah, thanks ever so much for joining me today, and I hope I see you both very soon.
Thank you.
He's furiously pressing buttons over there.
Hi everyone, hello again, and thank you very much to our guest speakers for their valuable insights and information. I'm just going to put on screen in a moment a link that will take you through to our Target Jobs events. That will show you all our upcoming panel webinars and sort of general webinars. Our next one is going to be hosted by Spitfire Network Services, giving an in-depth look into their company and their opportunities. Our next panel webinar is going to be on May the 4th, and it's how to get into a teaching career. So thank you again for everyone who joined, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your days.
Thanks all.
There we go.
Bye.